If you're a fan of Pokemon like I am, you've probably played all, if not most, of the games in the series. You probably noticed that certain types are weak against others. Some are rather self-explanatory, and others, well, not so much. In this video, I'm going to explain every weakness of Pokemon types, and explain why those types are weak against those. So, without further ado, let's get into it. If you're part of the Pokemon fandom, then you should probably know that there are currently 18 official Pokemon types in the series. These types consist of normal, grass, fire, water, electric, fighting, ice, poison, ground, flying, psychic, bug, rock, ghost, dragon, dark, steel, and fairy. So let's start with normal types. Normal types are the kind that have no specific element background or aren't a ghost or have psychic abilities. These would be Pokemon like Rattata, Meowth, Lickitung, or Chansey. These Pokemon are only weak against fighting types. Why is that? Well, it's rather simple. Fighting types are trained at combat, whereas normal types are not. If you were to put an average everyday person in the ring with a professional wrestler, well, it's pretty obvious who would come out on top. Next up we have grass Pokemon. Those would include Tangela, Bulbasaur, and Oddish. Grass types are weak against fire, flying, bug, poison, and ice types. Fire can burn down plants very quickly, like in forest fires. Flying types such as birds often eat plants and use them to build nests. Most insects such as caterpillars tend to eat plants too. Poison is used to kill plants with toxic chemicals such as weed killer. An overnight frost can freeze over plants and prevent them from getting oxygen, virtually suffocating them. Next, fire Pokemon. That would include Charmander, Vulpix, and Growlithe. Fire types are weak against water, ground, and rock. Why do you ask? Well, let's see. Water is used to put out fire. Rocks can also be used to put out fire, as well as preventing it from traveling any further. Soil is often used to bury fires, and the lack of oxygen that the fire needs will eventually put it out. Next, we have water. Those types would include Squirtle, Psyduck, and Poliwag. Water is weak against electric and grass types, and here's why. Plant roots absorb water for nutrition, so if anything, you would be helping them. Water is a very good conductor of electricity. Shocking, isn't it? Speaking of which, next up, electric types. Much like normal types, they only have one weakness, and it's ground. Electric types such as Pikachu, Voltorb, and Electabuzz. These types are weak against ground, and here's why. Earth is not a very good conductor of electricity. For example, if you stick an electric wire into the ground, the electricity will just harmlessly disperse into the dirt. And as for lightning strikes, they stop traveling once they hit the ground. Next, we have fighting types. Those would include Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan, and Matcha. Fighting types are weak against flying, psychic, and fairy types, and here's why. Psychic types tend to overpower fighting types in most scenarios due to the brains over bronze thing. Due to having the higher ground, flying types have an advantage over fighting types, and not to mention, have you ever tried punching a bird in flight? What good are your fighting skills when a fairy can just cast a magic spell and turn you into a weak little bug? We got ice types next. That would include Snorunt, Jinx, and Glaceon. Ice types are weak against fire, rock, fighting, and steel, and here's why. Fire melts ice.
Duh.
Hard rocks can be used to smash ice into pieces. Fighters can demonstrate their strength by breaking through ice. There are many steel tools that are used to break apart ice, such as ice picks.
That girl is
Sorry, anyway. These Pokemon are poison types, which includes Ekans, Nidoran, and Grimer. Poison types are weak against Psychic and Ground, and I'll tell you why. Great minds are always thinking of cures for diseases, and it could also be a reference to the mind over matter theme. The Earth absorbs toxins and is able to heal itself in time. Hit the ground! Well, actually don't. We're talking about ground types, which happen to include Sandshrew, Diglett, and Cubone. Ground Pokemon are weak against grass, water, and ice, and here's an explanation of why. Plants grow and obtain nutrients from the ground using their roots. Water can erode soil as well as wash away dirt and mud. Ice can freeze over the ground and cause it to crack. Anyway, we got flying types here, which include Pidgey, Spearow, and Farfetch'd. Those Pokemon are weak against electric, rock, and ice types, and here's why. Since flying types usually take to the air, they are more prone to damage from electricity generated through clouds. Birds often migrate for the winter, as they typically do not fare well in colder weather. Rocks are often used as projectiles against birds. Ever heard the phrase, kill two birds with one stone?
Figured out a way to kill two birds with one stone. Like this. The key to that...
If you're a psychic, you'd know I'm gonna talk about psychic types, which include Abra, Drowsy, and Mr. Mime. They have a weakness to bug, ghost, and dark types. Since you can't read my mind, I'm going to tell you why. Insects are often seen as annoying and distracting little pests that can break one's concentration, which psychic types rely heavily on. Ghosts tend to mess with humans by fooling them with tricks and mischievous games, causing the human mind to go haywire. The most common fear for humans is the dark, which can really rattle people and mess with their minds. And as it is the most common human fear, it might explain why dark is completely immune to psychic, whereas bug and ghost are not. Don't bug out! We're talking about bug-type Pokemon, which include Pinsir, Weedle, and Caterpie. They are weak to fire, rock, and flying types, and I'll tell you why. Insects are very susceptible to fire, which often burns them alive. Rocks can be used to squash bugs flat. Flying types such as birds are common predators of insects. Let's rock! Okay, so we got rock types, which include Onyx, Geodude, and Aerodactyl. These rock stars are weak against grass, water, fighting, ground, and steel types. And here's why. Plants can grow their way through rocks by using their roots to break them apart. This process is called root wedging. Water can erode rocks, breaking it down very slowly and making it into a sediment. Fighters, such as martial artists, typically break through rocks for training. The earth can swallow and break rocks during an earthquake. Steel is harder than rock, and many metal tools such as drills and pickaxes are used to break through rocks. Don't be ghosting me here. I'm talking about ghost-type Pokemon, which are weak against dark and ghost types. Wait, what? Ghost types are weak against ghost types? You heard that right. Those ghosts, which include Sableye, Misdreavus, and Ghastly. I'll explain why. Ghosts are not solid, so the only thing that could fight a ghost would be another ghost. Ghosts can turn evil. Petrified spirits can end up getting corrupted by evil spirits, which is what the dark type represents. Next, we have dragon types, which include Dratini, Bagon, and Gibble. Those Pokemon are weak against Ice, Fairy, and Dragon? What? Just like ghost types. I'll explain. Dragons resemble reptiles and are most likely cold-blooded. Reptiles need to warm up their bodies in order to just simply move around. So low temperatures and icy conditions would affect their metabolisms very badly. Dragons are mythical creatures and are said to be so powerful that the only thing that can defeat one is another dragon. In fairy tales, the dragon is usually the creature that is slain at the end of the story. For example, in the film Sleeping Beauty, the climax involves Prince Philip slaying Maleficent in her dragon form. Hey, who turned out the lights? It's dark in here. There we go. Let's talk about dark-type Pokemon, such as Umbreon, Poochyena, and Absol, which they have a weakness to bug, fighting, and fairy types, and here's why. Many insects are most active at night, and therefore more adept at fighting during the dark hours. Most fighting types are depicted as good, whereas dark types are depicted as evil. In a classic superhero story, good will always triumph over the forces of evil. In fairy tales, evil always loses in the end. Just think of the saying, and they all lived happily ever after. Still crazy after all these years. We got Steel-type Pokemon, which include Registeel, Clink, and Meltan. And they are weak against fire, fighting, and ground types. And here's why. Intense heat melts steel, and metal is also a very good conductor of heat. Fighters can demonstrate extreme strength by breaking through steel, possibly referencing the Man over Machine theme too. Sudden earthquakes can cause most metal structures to break apart. Last but certainly not least, we got fairy types, which would include Clefairy, Togepi, and Snubbull. They are weak against poison and steel, which may sound weird, but I'll explain why. Many fairies are portrayed as nature spirits and tend to have very weak immune systems. This makes them very susceptible to any kind of poison. For example, in the film Peter Pan, when Captain Hook tries to poison Peter, Tinkerbell ends up taking the poison instead, and it almost kills her. These weaknesses could also be a callback to the poison apple from the classic fairy tale Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. In many mythological stories, steel tends to have a very negative effect on fairies. If a fairy would come in close contact with any kind of metal, like iron, it would drastically weaken them and their powers. For example, in the film Peter Pan, once again, Captain Hook locks up Tinkerbell in a small metal cage at one point in the film. You would think Tinkerbell would just use her pixie magic and free herself, but since she was in close contact with metal, her powers were weakened and she was unable to escape. So there you have it. I hope this brings some clarity as to why certain types are weak against another. What do you think of my explanation? Let me know in the comments below. Like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at BlackAlmond10, and I'll see you all in the next one.